story of Ramsey Knight, the oldest form of this legend, has been handed down to us by Herodotus. It occurs in the ancient folklore of both Eastern and Western peoples, and its origin has often been debated. If not really of Egyptian origin, it had been certainly become Egyptianized when Herodotus found it. It relates how King Ramsey Knight possessed so much treasure that none of his successors ever surpassed or even came near to having a like amount. To ensure its safety, he had a seemingly impregnable stone house built, in which he placed all his great wealth by a clever trick. However, the architect contrived to provide access to the treasure. He made one of the stone in two parts, so that one part could be removed, but so skillfully were two parts placed together that they presented a perfectly even surface, as of one simple stone. Before he died, he acquainted his two sons with the secret of the treasure house, and after his death, they did not delay in putting their knowledge into practice. They went by night, found the stone without any difficulty, withdrew it, stole a large sum of money, and replaced it in possession. When the king discovered that the thieves were at work, he had man-traps placed near the site of the treasure house. One night, the two brothers came as usual, and one of them was caught in trap. Seeing his danger, he called his brother and said to him, "We shall both perish, and the treasure be lost unless you cut off my head and take it away, so that no one will recognize us as the thieves." The brother did as he advised. He moved the stone back into position, cut off his brother's head, and carried it home. When the king found the headless body, he was much disturbed, for there were no traces of entrance or exit from treasure house, and he bethought himself of this expedient. He had the dead body exposed on the city wall and placed a guard around it, with instruction to watch and report whoever manifested any sign of grief on seeing the body. This act was contrary to the practice of the Egyptians, who had usually too much respect for the dead to indulge in it. Even in the case of an executed criminal, the remains were returned to their relatives to be embalmed. Nevertheless, Ramsey Knight considered himself justified in adopting this measure. The body was exposed, and the mother, although she did not betray any sign of grief, insisted on her other son bringing it to her. Otherwise, she threatened to divulge the secret to the king. Seeing that he dared not disobey, the son devised a trap to them. He saddled some asses and loaded them with goat skin full of wine. Skins were used in Egypt for water only at most times. Wine being held in short narrow vases, he drove the asses past the cart and, when passing, stealthily untied one or two of the skins, and as the wine ran down and flowed on the ground, began to beat his head and make a great outcry. The guards ran for the vessels to save the precious liquid, and over the catastrophe, they became quite friendly with the thief and gave him meat, for which he offered in exchange one of his skin of wine. They all sat down to drink together, and as they became merry over wine, he offered them the remainder of his wine, which they took and drank until they quite tipsy. The thief, needless to say, had taken care to remain tolerably sober. After the guards were in a drunken sleep, he waited till nightfall, and then cut down his brother's body and took it home on the asses of his mother. Before quieting the guard, he shaved off all the hair on one side of their faces. When the king heard of the trick, he was furious, and determined by fair means or foul discover its author. He hit upon the following plan. He ordered the princess, his daughter, to receive any man in the land, no matter whom, and to grant him whatever favor he might ask of her. But first, he must ask him tell her what the cleverest and wickedest thing he had ever done. When the thief told her his trick, he was to have him burned before he could escape. The princess was ready to do her father's bidding, but the thief, knowing well what the king had in his mind, resolved to circumvent him a third time. He cut off the arm of a newly dead man, and hiding it under his robe, obtained admission to the princess. On being asked the question that she put all comers, he told her first about cutting off his brother's head in the trap, and then went on to tell, having made the guards tipsy, he had cut down his brother's body. She at once pulled out and tried to seize him, but he placed in her hand that one of the dead man, which she grasped firmly, believing it to be the thief's, and he escaped in darkness of the room. The king now owned himself beaten, and offered a free pardon and rich reward to the man who had boldly witted him. Trusting to his word, the thief presented himself before the king, and received not only what Ramsey Knight had promised, but also the hand of the princess in marriage. For he held the thief to be the cleverest of men, and that he had doubted the Egyptians, who prided themselves on their astuteness. The Shipwrecked Sailor. 4,000 years ago, a ship glided into its home, harbor in the land of Egypt. A sailor jumped ashore with a rope and tied it to the mooring post. His comrades rejoiced and embraced one another, so glad they were to have survived their long journey at sea, and to know that soon they would fill in their arms with their children and kissing their wives. But as the ship's owner stepped ashore, dark, anxious lines crossed his brow. His business in the lands of Wawat and Bega had not prospered, and he feared the anger of the great Pharaoh who ruled the land of Egypt. He had an attendant, a smart young fellow who understood what was troubling his master's mind. As they stepped off the boat, he tried to give his master words of assurance. "Be satisfied, my lord, for we have returned in good health, and not a single one of us is lost. You may go and tell the tale of our journey to the Pharaoh. Choose your words carefully, trust in your eloquence, and all will be well. You are home, but your mind is still wandering. A man's mouth may save him, but so it may also get him into trouble. Do you always say out loud the thought that flies into your head? If you must babble such nonsense, pray, say it quietly to yourself." The smart young man was not offended by this rebuke. Instead, he replied to his master with a story about another adventure that he had once undertaken, and this is what he told him. "I was on a journey across the great green sea to the mines of the Pharaoh. We had 120 sailors, the best in Egypt. Their hearts were fiercer than lions. They had seen many skies. They had seen many lands. They could tell a storm before it came, and gale before it happened. As we approached the land, the wind arose and threw up enormous waves. Our ship split in two, and all the mortal souls within were at the mercy of the great green sea. I grabbed a plank of cedar wood and stayed afloat. A wave picked me up and placed me down on the shore of an island. After I had lain for 3 days, all alone in some bushes, I arose and looked for something for my mouth. I found it in abundance: figs and grapes, all manner of good herbs, berries and grain, melons of all kinds, fishes and birds. Indeed, the island did not lack for anything good. After I had satisfied my hunger, I dug a pit, lit a fire, and made a burnt offering to the gods. Suddenly I heard a crashing sound, which I took to be a wave crashing against the land. The trees shook and the earth moved. I uncovered my eyes, and I saw that an enormous snake was slithering towards me. He was the size of a temple building. His face was that of a man, and he wore a beard as tall as a pillar. His skin was as blue as true lapis lazuli, and he was overlaid with gold. I threw myself on my belly before him, before he opened his mouth and said, "Who brought you? Who brought you? O commoner, who brought you? If you delay your reply, it shall be the worst of you. Your life should be extinguished, like a flickering flame of a candle." I lay still, stunned, silent, my mouth full of sand. When the serpent saw that could get no reply out of me, he scooped me up in his mouth and carried me to his cave, where he laid me down. Again he asked, "Who brought you? Who brought you? O commoner, who brought you? To this island of the great green sea, whose two sides are lapped by waves." And then I realized that my life depended on my words replied to him. I was on a mission sent by the Pharaoh. We had 120 sailors, the best in Egypt. Their hearts fiercer than lions. They had seen many skies. They had seen many lands. They could tell a storm before it came, and gale before it happened. Each one was no less strong or fierce than his companion, and there was not a single fool among us. As we approached the land, the wind arose and threw up enormous waves. Our ship was split in two, and of all who were on board, I alone was saved. And behold, Here I am at your side. I was brought to this land by a wave of the great green sea. It seemed that my words soothed the anger of the great man-serpent, for he smiled gently and replied to me, "Fear not, O commoner, do not be pale, for it is God who has let you live and has brought you to me. You will spend 4 months on this island of blessed, which does not lack for any good thing. At the end of that period, a ship will arrive and take you home to your wife and family, and you shall live and finally die in your own town. Now, since you have survived this accident, let me tell you a tale of calamity that befell me. I once lived on this island with my family, 75 serpents in all, without counting an orphan girl who was brought to me by chance, and who was dear to my heart. One night a star came crashing down from heaven, and they all went up in flames. Only I was spared, and behold, here I am, utterly alone. But you, if you are brave and overcome your fears, you will fill your arms with your children and kiss your wife. You will see your house and live among your family." When I heard this prophecy of my salvation, I wept and bowed and touched the ground before him and said, "On my return I shall tell the Pharaoh all about you and your greatness. I will bring you sacred oils and perfumes, and incense with which gods are honored in the temples. I shall slay animals for you in sacrifice. I shall bring you birds and ships full of kinds of treasure from Egypt, and they shall speak of you in the council and honor you throughout the land." And when he heard this, he laughed and rebuked me. "Do not trouble yourself with incense, for you are not rich in perfumes. As for me, I am a prince of the land of Pond, and I have all the riches sent. You not need return, for after you depart, this island shall be covered by the sea." My rescue and salvation came true exactly as he said. After 4 months had gone by, I climbed a tree, and behold, I saw a ship on the horizon. It came to rescue me. And as I took my leave on my serpentine host, he said, "Go to your house, see your children, spread my good name in your city. This my due from you." He gave me gifts of incense, myrrh and balsam, tails of giraffes and elephant tusks. As I departed, I and all who were on board the ship gave praises to the serpent god. We sailed northwards, and 2 months later, I came before Pharaoh and presented him with a tribute of gifts I had brought from the island. I told him of my adventures, and he thanked me before the council, and rewarded me with a position in his court. With these words, the attendant finished his story of his shipwreck and survival. The master of the ship had waited patiently on the quay by the side of the ship, and had listened carefully. He was not pleased with the story, and he said, "Save your smart words, my young friend. Such drop of hope do no me good. Who gives water to a goose in morning when it is due to be slaughtered in the afternoon?" And that was the tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor.
The Peasant and the Workman, a tale of the 9th dynasty, which from the number of copies extant would seem to have been very popular, relates how a peasant succeeded in obtaining justice after he had been robbed. Justice was not very easily obtained in Egypt in those times, for it seems to have been requisite that a peasant should attract the judge's attention by some special means, if his case were be able to heard at all. The story runs thus: in the salt country there dwelt a Siktai, or peasant, with his family. He made his living by trading with Heninsiten in salt, natron, rushes, and the other products of his country. And as he journeyed thither, he had to pass through the lands of the house of Phefa. Now there dwelt by the canal a man named Tehotinit, the son of Asri, a serf to the high steward Meriotinsa. Tehotinit had so far encroached on the path of roads and paths were not protected by law in Egypt as in other countries, that there was but a narrow strip left, the canal on the one side and a cornfield on the other, when Tehotinit saw the Siktai approaching with his burdened asses. His evil heart coveted the beast and the gods devoured, and he called the gods to open a way for him to steal the possessions of the city. The reward did as the king had commanded him. He gave the peasant a daily rotation of bread and beer, and to his wife sufficient corn to feed herself and her children. But the Siktai knew not whence the provinces came. A second time the peasant sought the judgment hall and poured forth his complaint to the Lord's steward, and yet a third time he came, and the Lord's steward commanded that he be smitten with staves to see whether the wood desist. But no, the Sikti came a fourth, a fifth, a sixth time, endeavoring with pleasant speeches to open the ear of the judge. The message, however, was a reassuring one. Rayutinsa declared that he had been greatly delighted by the peasant's eloquence and would see he obtained satisfaction. He then caused the Siktai's petitions to be written on clean papyri, much pleased with the speechless. But the giving of judgment he left entirely in the hands of the Lord's steward. Rayutinsa therefore deprived Tihukinek of all his offices and his property, and gave them to the Siktai, who then forth dwelt at the king's palace with all his family. And the Siktai became the chief officer of Nik Kanara, and was greatly beloved by him.
The Fable of Head and the Stomach. Romances regarding life in Egypt, such as dealing with kings Rhapsinitis given elsewhere, are frequent. A papyrus of about 1250 BC has for its background the war against the Hyksos, and describe an encounter between rival princess Apipi, leader of Hyksos, and the nationalist prince Hurasikenen, who dwelt the Upper Egypt. They propounded riddles to one another. On their solution, the fate of one of them depended. Fables were extremely popular in the Nile Valley from an early period. In the museum, an example, dating about 1000 BC, is painted upon two small boards and contained the story of a dispute between the head and the stomach. The Court of Authority, the supreme tribunal of Egypt, sits by judgment. The stomach first brings forward its case, but here the document is depicted. We have, however, the reply of the head, who at considerable length argues that he is principal being, from which of the other beings to support the house radiate. His is the eye that see, the mouth that speak, the nose that breathes. The rest of proceeding and the vidric are unfortunately wanting. It is interesting, however, to know of this early progenitor of the widespread fable of strife between the stomach and its principal, which has assumed by Minimus Agrippa to the Roman plebeians, when in 492 BC they threatened to forsake the city as the symbol of what might happen if they proceed to extremities. It contains good proof that the popular stories has, as a role, a lace of life spreading over many centuries, and that originating in one country and become in the time of property of many. It was often been asserted that in all likelihood of fables of Aesop's must have originated in Egypt, the land of animal worship, and it is noteworthy that in the Leiden Dumatic Papyrus we find the fable of the grateful mouse and the lion, which had become entangled in the net. But this dates within the Christian era, and it's probably Greek in conception. However, discovered stories of animals acting as human beings, playing games, engaging in war, just as we do in the folklore of other barbarian people. Lepsius imaged that the purport of most of this is satirical.